You're listening to the UnSafe Bible with Pastor Ken Brown.
Suddenly, while worshiping at the temple, Isaiah's eyes are opened and he sees the unseen realm. He sees the Lord. He sees not just this room with these doors off in the distance. He has the doors thrown open and he sees who's sitting on the throne. And he sees everything that no one else could see, but he sees it. He sees the unseen realm. He actually sees what is there.
Can you imagine what it would be like to be in the presence of God and to actually see Jesus? In today's message, Pastor Ken says that throughout the Old Testament, God reveals himself through his Son. Sometimes he is called the angel of the Lord, or appears in the cloud by day and pillar of fire at night to the Israelites. As Isaiah is worshiping in the temple, his eyes are opened. He sees the unseen realm and receives a revelation from God. The pre-incarnate Jesus Christ appears to Isaiah. Well, let's join Pastor Ken in the book of Isaiah, chapter 6, as he continues his message, Isaiah's Job Interview.
There has not been a king in Judah since Solomon who loved the Lord like Uzziah did. Even though he blew it, and Solomon blew it too. But this man had served really, really well, and the people had been able, because he loved the Lord, been able to take advantage of really good times, economically, militarily. There was peace, there was building, it was just a good time to be alive. Everybody had 2 chariots in every garage. It was a good thing. He had been an efficient administrator. He had been an able military leader. And Judah had grown in every way possible during this time period. So this is the guy who is dying or has died. Now, that would be a shock to everyone who had been living during that time period. It'd be no different than the shock that existed here in the United States when Roosevelt passed away during his 4th term as president, just towards the end of World War II. Not a good time for someone who's a leader to pass away, and especially one that everybody had been relying on for the past 3 terms going into the 4th. So Uzziah is the same situation. So what happens then when the king dies? That's a question people have. They don't know what's going to happen next. They know that there are some nations in the area that don't get along well. They don't play well with others in the sandbox, and they're starting to grow in power again. So is something going to happen? And so there's a nervousness within the culture at this point because of the pending death or the death that's taken place. Not much different than what we see in terms of the nervousness in our culture today. The death of Uzziah, even though he had been suffering from the effects of leprosy for the last 12 years, still hit hard. His son Jotham was a good administrator. They already knew how he would deal with things. He had been the administrator over the kingdom as a regent for the past 12 years while his dad was still king. But now Jotham is the king, or is about to be the king. So how will he do? Good question. Uzziah was godly. He followed the Lord. That provided everything that Judah has been enjoying. They thought peace, though, was due to their professional army. They thought peace also led to economic good times. And they had peace also with the northern kingdom. Everything was good. But the death of a good king is enough to throw everything into turmoil. Is the next king going to love the Lord and be as good? You don't know. As we've already seen from the first 5 chapters, while this has been going on and they think everything's good, Yahweh's impression of Judah at this time is everything's not good. There are problems on the home front. Everything is got an issue somewhere along the line. The people are complacent, and complacency has resulted in the people of Judah already embracing sin to a level that had never been seen before. I mean, you can read through the prophets. Several of them will say that by the time the nation goes into captivity into Babylon, they had actually exceeded the sin of the nations that they had kicked out of the promised land when they came in. The curses, as we've seen, have already been triggered. We talked about that last week with the earthquake that took place during the latter portion of Uzziah's reign. There's been an earthquake. Things are just now starting to kind of key in, and that was the first warning pang, the first warning that something is about to happen. Isaiah says that at that moment, sometime during that year, that the king died. He saw the Lord. Now, the word he uses for Lord is Adonai. He does not use Yahweh. He uses Adonai. The setting that he implies is that either he received a vision or he was actually at the temple and he was worshiping. Now, when you would worship, you would not be in the holy place. You would not be in the Holy of Holies. Isaiah is not a priest. He's of the tribe of Judah. He can't go in there. That's why Uzziah became a leper. He tried to go into the holy place to offer a sacrifice of incense, and that just was not supposed to happen. So here is Isaiah. He's worshiping. He's worshiping the Lord. He's talking to the Lord. And all of a sudden, the throne of Yahweh opens up to him. Now, the throne of Yahweh in the temple was in the Holy of Holies. In the Holy of Holies, there is the Ark of the Covenant, and on top of the Ark is the mercy seat. And the mercy seat sits on top of it. And every year during the Day of Atonement, after an awful lot of ceremony, the high priest would actually go into the Holy of Holies and apply blood between the two cherubim who are actually on the mercy seat, right where the throne of Yahweh would be. That's Yahweh's throne. And let me give you a little more background about what it looked like after Solomon built it up, because it's a little bit more than just this ark sitting inside a room. Inside this room, in 1 Kings 6:23-36, he says this: he made 2 cherubim of wild olive wood. So there's these 2 carved cherubim, and we know they have wings, and each are 15 feet tall, and he placed them in the inner sanctuary. That's the Holy of Holies. The wingspan of each cherubim was 15 feet. So these are big statues that were created, each wing being 7.5 feet long. The 2 cherubim were identical in shape and size. Each was 15 feet tall. And Solomon placed them side by side in the inner sanctuary of the temple. Their outspread wings touched from wall to wall, while their inner wings touched at the center of the room. He overlaid the 2 cherubim with gold, and he decorated all the walls of the inner sanctuary in the main room with carvings of cherubim. So there's cherubim everywhere, and these are not fat, naked babies flying around the room. These are large beings that we are introduced to back in the book of Genesis, and we also are introduced to in the book of Ezekiel. They carry swords. They are throne guardians. They hang out around the throne of God. They're not angels. They're cherubim. So he overlaid the 2 cherubim with gold. He decorated all the walls in the inner sanctuary in the main room with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. And he overlaid the floor in both rooms with gold. So here you have the holy place. It has a gold floor, and the Holy of Holies has a gold floor. For the entrance to the inner sanctuary, he made double doors of wild olive wood with 5-sided doorposts. These double doors were decorated with, again, carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. And the doors, including the decorations of cherubim and palm trees, were overlaid with gold. Then he made 4-sided doorposts of wild olive wood for the entrance to the temple. There were 2 folding doors of cypress wood, and each door was hinged to fold back upon itself. These doors were decorated with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, all overlaid evenly with gold. The walls of the inner courtyard was built so that there was 1 layer of cedar beams between every 3 layers of finished stone. The reason why I want you to understand what it looks like, that's what Solomon built. It may have degraded a little bit over the couple hundred years since Solomon built it, but that's what would be the inside of the temple. Now, here is Isaiah. He's worshiping at the temple, and it is there that Isaiah sees Adonai. He sees the Lord. Again, he doesn't use the word Yahweh here. He is seeing the one who was in the cloud by day and in the pillar of fire by night. And we know that at this time in the history of Israel, That cloud was over the temple during the day, and the pillar of fire was there at night. Suddenly, while worshiping at the temple, Isaiah's eyes are opened and he sees the unseen realm. He sees the Lord. He sees not just this room with these doors off in the distance. He has the doors thrown open and he sees who's sitting on the throne. And he sees everything that no one else could see, but he sees it. He sees the unseen realm. He actually sees what is there. This is the same one, the same person who was in the cloud back in Exodus. It's the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ is what it is. That's who's there. The second power in heaven, as many Jews would call it at this time. And you see that all through the Old Testament, by the way. He has names in the Old Testament. He's called the angel of the Lord. He is called the Word of God. He is called the captain of the Lord's host. And those are just some of the names, not all of them, that he is known as from the Old Testament. Now, in Exodus chapter 23, verses 20 to 22, we see this about that one who was in the cloud and the one that Isaiah is seeing on the throne. God tells Moses this, I'm going to send an angel before you to protect you as you journey and bring you into the place I've prepared. Okay, and an angel, I get that, but then listen to the rest of the language. Take heed because of him and obey his voice and do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgressions. Wait a minute, for my name is in him. Okay, now we know this is the angel of the Lord. This is Malak Yahweh, if you want to look at it in terms of the Hebrew. This is the pre-incarnate Christ. If you diligently obey him and do all that I command, then I'll be an enemy to your enemies and I'll be an adversary to your adversaries. This angel has the name Yahweh in him. He has the power to pardon, something only God can do, something only Yahweh can do, and obedience is required. This is Jesus. And John confirms that in John chapter 12, verse 41. He actually talks about Isaiah, and he talks about what Isaiah saw in chapter 6, and he says, these things Isaiah said when he saw his, speaking of Jesus, glory and spoke of him. Oh, okay, I get that. John confirms that this is Jesus in John 12:41. Now, he does not see Yahweh here, but he does see Adonai. Because you have to remember, God said, Yahweh said in Exodus 33:20, you cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live. So that's why I'm saying it's not Yahweh, it's Adonai. It's got to be Adonai. The appearance that we see throughout the Old Testament of God, the angel of the Lord, over and over and over again, the one that Abraham talked to, that came up and chatted with him before two angels actually went down to Sodom and Gomorrah. It was the pre-incarnate Christ. It was the angel of the Lord. On top of that, the throne the Lord is on is above every throne in the universe, because we see that the Lord sitting on a throne, lofty and exalted. So this throne is not just a throne like the throne of Judah. This is the throne for above all thrones in the universe. It's lofty. It's exalted. It means that this throne is above all others, and the one who is on it is above all others. We're in the throne room of the universe here. We know that. We're beginning to pick up on that. So far in verse 1, Isaiah sees the Lord on a throne. He's over all other thrones as he's lofty and exalted. He also sees the train of his robe physically filling the temple. This is not a small space. We were talking about a little bit of it from the information provided earlier by Solomon, but his robe fills the temple. It reflects that he still wants the nation's true worship. The robe is in every section of the temple. He fills everything. His presence is throughout the temple. Now, last week we examined that there are residents of the unseen realm. We talked about who they were. We talked about some of their job descriptions, some of the other names that they carry. But and there's a lot of job descriptions in the Bible, both the fallen and the faithful. Here in Isaiah 6, we get a physical description and a hint, by the way, also of what may have actually happened back in Numbers 21:6. We are introduced to a being called a seraphim. Now, what's a seraphim? Let's take a look at that. A seraphim, That's a plural of the word seraph. Seraphim, more than one. It's a Hebrew word that also is translated snake. Dr. Heiser says this: these descriptions are reflected in iconography throughout the biblical period. I mean, if you were to go and look at other nations and see what they had carved pictures of these things, these seraphs, because each of them had different types of throne guardians. But this is the real throne guardian over the real throne. And Dr. Heiser says this from his book Angels. He says, they are never qualified with the term angel or malek. Cherubim and seraphim are not angels. Don't think of them in that way. They're throne guardians. Verse 2 of chapter 6, seraphim stood above him, each having 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. So he's got 2 wings over the eyes, 2 wings over the feet, and 2 wings that he's hovering with, flying with, because it says he stood. Seraphs are throne guardians. That's what they are. That's what they do. That's where they hang out. Unlike the cherubs that Ezekiel sees, the seraphs have 6 wings, not 4. Just like the 4 living creatures that John sees in Revelation 4. They have 6 wings as well. Thanks to Numbers 21:6, we know a little bit about their parents, because in Numbers 21:6, that's where there was a group of Israelites did something they weren't supposed to be doing, and a bunch of snakes go out and start biting them. At least that's the way I was taught over the years. But when you start digging into the language, it says from the Jewish text of the Torah, the Lord sent fiery serpents. Now, fiery there is the root word for seraph or seraphim. Fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. It creates enough confusion that some Bible scholars now are looking at saying, were these snakes or were these seraphim who had been sent by God to judge the people? Could have been. We don't know. The seraphim, though, they're generally conceived as winged serpents that have human attributes. The word seraph has 3 occasions in the Pentateuch. We already took a look at Numbers 21:6. It also happens in Numbers 21:8 and again in Deuteronomy 8:15. But it's going to be used more times than that in the book of Isaiah. This is the first time that we see this term here in the book of Isaiah. It comes from a root word that means to burn, incinerate, or destroy. It probably denotes an entity, a being that annihilates by burning. So you could say this is a burner or something like that. But so it's a snake-like burner. And we're beginning to all of a sudden say, wait a minute, maybe that being back in Genesis 3 wasn't a snake. We know that he was a throne guardian. He was a cherub. Maybe we're picking up a little bit more about what he actually looked like based on what we're seeing here. Anyway, we know that Isaiah is before the heavenly council. We know that. There's going to be a lot of, as we saw in the book of Revelation, a lot of songs, a lot of praise, a lot of worship taking place around the throne of God. That's part of it. The seraphim are there, and they are part of the host of heaven. They don't carry Yahweh's throne. We see in Ezekiel that's not the one who's carrying it. They hover above him. It says they stand above him. Just think hovering, okay? So you have 2 wings they're hovering. I don't know what sound that is because Isaiah doesn't tell us. He just says they're standing. So there's a difference between a cherubim and a seraphim. Cherubim actually carry the throne. Seraphim are above it. Now, if you were to examine the Hebrew word a little bit more, it's a type of venomous snake. Yeah, we know that. But it's also used as a flying dragon, too, elsewhere in the scriptures. Isaiah will actually use it as that. So you start seeing this cross between it's a snake-like creature. It's a term that is flexible enough to be used a lot of different ways. But the one thing I will say, and I agree with Dr. Heiser, it's not an angel. An angel is a job description. This is not what their job is. Now we're aware of cherubim as throne guardians. We know what the requirement for images of cherubim are. We saw that on the mercy seat when we already looked at what was built by Solomon. We also see the description of his work, and we see the images of the cherubs every place in the holy place. I mean, we saw that very clear. The Holy of Holies, you have the two 15-foot tall gold-covered cherubim on the sides of the ark with a mercy seat. But this is a throne guardian. Just as the cherubim are throne guardians, the seraphim are also throne guardians. They're guardians of the throne of God. They're snake-like. They would have been understood as such by everyone reading this during the time of Isaiah. So again, we're having to kind of understand a different mindset rather than what we would look at today. The Jewish nation had been in Egypt 1,000 years earlier, and they were aware of different things going on in different countries, just as we are today. So they would be aware of things in Egyptian culture. And the reason why I say that is that if you do a little bit of research from the Theological Dictionary of the Old Testament, there is a serpent that appears in Egypt that they use in their iconography of their throne as a throne guardian. And it's a protective deity. It kills a god, not a servant of the Lord here. But they actually saw it as a god that would kill the enemy of the gods and the king by spitting fire. Same difference. The iconography and the imagery that exists at the time, and most of Isaiah's readers would immediately identify a seraphim as a snake-like winged throne guardian. They know what that is. We don't, because we don't see that much. The root word again, seraph, comes from the meaning to burn completely. So again, what is he seeing? A snake-like throne guardian hovering motionlessly with a burning appearance over the throne of God. The use of the root word may also speak to the fact that they have burning zeal for God and for service to God. So it could be a description of their appearance. It could also be a description of what they were like. They have 6 wings. They only need 2 to fly. They cover their faces with 2 of the wings and their feet with 2 of the wings. We don't know how many there are there. There are at least 2 because it's a plural word. You've got to have more than 2 to be plural. The 2 wings covering their feet means it covers the lower portion of the body, and then the others cover their face because they're humbling themselves before the Lord. They don't want to look upon the Lord. The other 2 wings, they can go anywhere that they need to go because they're hovering. They're ready to move any direction based upon what the Lord wants them to do. And by the way, Eastern monarchs, if you were to go in and see one of these kings in the Middle East, you would not look at the king. You would keep your head down so that you wouldn't look, and you would cover your feet. You would cover your lower portion of your body. It's a token of reverence to them. That's just part of how you went to call on the king. Now, the word used for feet here is the Hebrew word regel. I'm probably mispronouncing that. And the use of this word in Hebrew is varied beyond simply understanding to mean feet. Now, for a Jew, they would understand that feet are the point of contact with an unclean environment. You didn't have sealed shoes like we have today. You would wear sandals or you'd be barefoot. And the priests were required to wash their feet before beginning their duties because they'd been walking around in the dirt. They had muck on their feet. They had whatever else was on their feet too. So the feet were a zone of uncleanliness. And the Jews would think, well, that attracts unclean spirits. Don't know about that. Now the priest, though, he wore bells on the bottom of his, the high priest wore bells on the bottom of his garment.
The voice you just heard is that of Pastor Ken here on the UnSafe Bible, as he's making his way through an Old Testament book of Isaiah. This is one of many teachings in this book, and we trust that the words of Isaiah will encourage you in your own walk of faith. Are you new to hearing the Word of God? Are you still trying to figure out this whole Jesus thing? You know what? That's okay. We all begin somewhere. Are you listening closely? Begin now. We're here for you and would like nothing better than to connect with you. Pretty pleased with a cherry on top to go to our website? All right, it's the unsafebible.com. And click on the Connect tab. Then click on the Connect card. There you'll find a form to fill out. This allows us to get in touch with you. We honestly look forward to speaking with you. If this feels a little overwhelming, we understand. Why not come see firsthand what we're all about? We'd love to have you at one of our services. All information can be found at the unsafebible.com. While you're there, be sure to look around. You can learn more about us and what we believe. Or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. There's also an archive of messages easily organized so that you can find whatever interests you rather quickly. Don't be shy. Stay a while and soak in God's Word. When you're done listening, would you prayerfully consider donating to this ministry? If so, just locate the Give tab to get started. Thank you so much for your support. Our time is about up for today, but we hope you make plans to join us again here on the UnSafe Bible.